Okay, guys, we're ready to go.
Hello, everybody. We just want to thank everyone for showing up to our Zoom event this evening. This evening, Tyler Lamb,
Hello, I'm
Enzo
Tyler. I'm a junior at Medford High.
Enzo Zerlatini,
Hi guys, I'm a senior at Medford High.
and I, John Scarpelli, a junior at Medford High School, will be presenting the 50 years of environmental activism that has taken place in our home city, Medford.
So I think everyone's muted by now, but if you're not muted, please mute your mic. And if you have any questions, please put it in the chat below, and we'll answer them at the end. Also, this presentation will be recorded. So at this time, I'd like to advise anyone that if you're not comfortable with this, just turn off your cameras. So from left to right, we have Tyler Lamb, Enzo Zellartini, and John Scarpelli. And we're a group of Medford High students that we're a part of the Center for Citizenship and Social Responsibility, also known as CCSR. It's an organization that runs in every school in the district. On top of that, we're just concerned about the current state of our climate, and we want to help fix it and protect our environment. We have been working in collaboration with Ken Krause, and who is a member of Friends of the Mystic River, and along with other Medford community groups.
So why are we doing this project? So at the start of this school year, Ken Krause reached out to us with some fascinating information. He was looking through some old MHS yearbooks from the 70s, and he found pages dedicated to the People Against Pollution Club. With that, the motivation to piece together the history of environmental activism in Medford was created within us. And we also felt that this was a good time to do it because it's the 50th anniversary of the new Medford High campus. So with the People Against Pollution Club as our starting point, we discovered a rich history that Medford has in terms of trying to be green. And with this project, we would like to highlight the history as well as build off it and continue the legacy. We believe it's important to know your history, but it's just as important, even more so, to highlight what you're doing now and what you need to do in the future so that we can solve this existential crisis.
Medford's history. Medford was founded in 1630 and became a city in 1892. During colonial times, it was famous for its production of rum. Paul Revere rode through Medford during the American Revolution to alarm Isaac Hall that the British were coming. And shipbuilding was a prominent industry in Medford in the late 1800s.
So this is actually a painting of Medford in 1880, just shortly before it became a city. Medford Square was really a prominent center point, and the Mystic River was an important commercial center. It had obviously less streets, less commercial buildings, and had more houses. But one thing I thought was pretty cool was that the main streets like Riverside or Forest Street really haven't changed. They really stayed the same. Also, something important to keep in mind is just how prominent Medford's green space was. Medford was seen as a place to escape from the city. It was considered as like a countryside, and people would come here on the weekend as a retreat.
Here we have an old photograph of one of Medford's most prominent geographical features, the Mystic River, which was a tidal water body until the construction of the Amelia Earhart Dam in 1966.
Here we have the Middlesex Canal. The Middlesex Canal was built in 1803. It ran from Lowell to Boston, which is a span of 27 miles. These two photos are the bridge over the canal at Sagamore Avenue in West Medford.
This is a photo of Middlesex Fells. Its first public part was opened in 1894. Before that, it was used for shoe and rubber mill companies. But over the next century, it grew more and more and open to the public, and eventually it grew to as much as 2,200 acres as of 2020.
And here we have a picture of Wright's Tower in the Middlesex Fells and his namesake, who is Eliza Wright. And we don't often think about this, but setting aside the forest, a nice piece of land, just for conservation and preservation was a radical idea when Eliza Wright started to do that in Medford. This was a time when industrial growth was increasing exponentially, and they needed land for their factories. They needed resources. They needed to use that land. But here in Medford, we said, no, we're going to keep this land for the enjoyment of the people, as well as to maintain that ecosystem, which in the late 19th century was a completely radical idea.
Here we have Wright's Pond. Wright's Pond is a beautiful preserved pond that is open to the public. People are allowed to observe the nature and wildlife surrounding them.
Here we have the Brooks Estate. It's Brooks Estate. So the city of Medford's Brooks Estate and its surrounding 50 acres in West Medford are permanently protected by a conservation and preservation restriction. It's an important area for birds and other wildlife that include nature trails and Brooks Pond. Medford's costly growth. Also throughout the 1950s, Medford's population again. There. All right. During the 1950s, Medford's population increased rapidly, and eventually the city was actually bisected by the construction of Interstate 93. And here we have a photo of where the arrow is. That's just approximately where Interstate 93 would be bisecting on Medford.
So as Enzo mentioned, the construction of I-93 cut Medford in half, and it increased automobile traffic, which contributed to diminished air quality by causing an increase in CO2 emissions from the new automobiles that would travel through.
Streetcar service was eliminated and replaced with buses in 1957. Park Street Station was closed in 1957, eliminating passenger train service to Boston. Medford went to a streetcar suburb to an automobile-oriented bedroom community. This contributed to the carbon emissions to go up because more people inevitably were forced to drive instead of using the train.
And so, meanwhile, our Mystic and Malden rivers that were once the center of commerce and trade suffered from being treated like sewers, contaminated with sewage and trash. And while Medford's rapid development and population growth was costly, it also moved residents and students to act and preserve Medford's green spaces and its quality of life.
Here we have environmental awareness movement in Medford from 1960s to the 1970s. The first Earth Day was held 50 years ago on April 22nd, 1970. To briefly describe this article that's shown above, it talks about how people are beginning to advocate for a healthier environment and to push to leave a smaller carbon footprint in order to preserve our environment for future generations.
So we actually had help with the government to kind of get a jump start, starting with the Clean Air Act in 1963. Was basically an act to speed up the creation of programs to reduce air pollution. We had the Clean Water Act in 1972, which gave funding to any company trying to improve the nation's waters. And then we had others such as the Endangered Species Act and the Safe Drinking Water Act. And also throughout this time, we had the Mystic River Watershed Association form. And it basically focused on water quality, restoring animal habitats, and more such like that.
And here we have that clipping from the yearbook of our inspiration for this project, the People Against Pollution Club, which was an MHS club that ran during the 1970s to try to stop pollution in Medford and environmental degradation. Their major projects were Mystic River cleanups and push for the city of Medford to buy recycled paper. And that's just a picture of the members.
We had a walk for culture, and it was held in Medford, and part of the proceeds actually went towards the People Against Pollution Club, which really helped out with their environmental advocacy. Also, at Medford High, class of 1993 graduate Cindy Brenner, who was actually here in the Zoom call, still has these news clippings from when she went before to city council as a Hobbs Junior High student in 1971. She urged the cleanup of a vacant lot on Placehead Road or Winthrop Street, and she did this with students, with getting students to volunteer, which basically ended up being a citywide cleanup campaign.
A scientific consensus started to form during the 1980s through 1990s in Medford and throughout the United States. It was determined that the effect of greenhouse gases were going to cause global warming quicker than expected. The end of the 1990s was really the turning point for Medford, implementing policies to help preserve the environment and to help combat climate change. In 1987, Medford residents continued to speak out about stormwater issues and their desire for more trees in the city. We are now known as the Tree City due to the fact that we have 1,480 acres or 28.1% of open area, which consists of trees and nature. This article also talks about how we needed to preserve our environment and the push to grow more trees in the city.
In the 1990s, we had two groups that were formed. The first one in 1993 was the Friends of Middlesex Fells, and their mission statement is basically the protection and harmonious use of the fells, promoting awareness, policies, and programs to honor and preserve ecological, historical, and recreational resources of the fells. We also had in 1995, the Friends of the Mystic River was formed, and it was basically a Medford-based community organization that focuses on the enjoyment, protection, and enhancement of the Mystic River in Medford.
And in 1999 was really one of the turning points for environmental advocacy in Medford. Medford got the Tree City USA designation, which means it maintains a forestry program. It has a tree warden, and it observes Arbor Day each year. The Medford Energy Task Force was created. Solar panels were installed on the roofs of City Hall and Medford High School, and they were later moved to Hormel Stadium. There were municipal lighting retrofits at City Hall and the Medford Public Library, and the city joined the Cities for Climate Protection campaign. And here we have some newspapers talking about Earth Day then, and it was Medford, the Medford Recycling Committee and 100 volunteers sorted through recyclables at the DPW yard, and the city has started a curbside recycling program in 1992.
Here we have the 2000s for environmental advocacy in Medford. In 2001, the Climate Action Plan was presented and introduced to the state of Massachusetts. Medford is the first city in Massachusetts to create a climate action plan, which was first written by Kim Lundgren and a graduate student at Tufts. The report prominently addresses climate change and sets emission reduction goals. Biodiesel and electric cars were introduced to the city and are now the active cars for Oak Grove Cemetery, as known as cemetery cars.
In 2002, we had LED traffic and pedestrian lights installed, and we also had our first energy efficiency fair.
In 2003, the Office of Energy and Environment was created, and Medford received a $500,000 grant to start using clean school buses.
The no school bus idling policy was established in 2004. In 2004, we as a city were awarded the EPA Clean Air Award. We were the first city in Massachusetts to receive the EPA Energy Star plaque.
So Massachusetts in 2005 set a policy which is called the Municipal Energy Efficiency Policy, which basically stated that each city in Massachusetts has to have a 15% improvement in their energy efficiency every 5 years. We also earned the Municipal Environmental Purchasing and Sustainability Award, which we were actually the first in Massachusetts to receive this award. And also, as in the slide before, we took part in the U.S. EPA Clean School Bus Project.
Here we have in 2007 the Energy Smackdown pilot, and the Energy Smackdown pilot was hosted in 2007 and was first introduced, in which the household with the most energy reduction wins, and it shows how us as a community is getting involved in trying to reduce energy.
And then in 2008, we had solar lighting installed on the monument at Oak Grove Cemetery. And we also hosted another Energy Smackdown competition.
In 2009, construction of the windmill was finished, which started in 2007. This really became a visible symbol of Medford's commitment to environmental advocacy, being such a big structure that can be seen from many parts of Medford. It provides 10% of the energy used for the McGlynn School, which saves about $25,000 a year. And in 2009, we also won the Energy and Efficiency Conservation Block Grant, which was for $500,000.
As you can see in the pictures above, these are the before pictures of River's Edge and how polluted it was before we took action to clean this part of Medford's environment. Also, it has very scarce amount of nature and green space. But now you can see how prominent it is and how it's thriving with green space after the cleanup on River's Edge. And there's a dense pollution of trees and nature and wildlife in River's Edge at the moment.
So here we have a before and after of the Mystic River, before and after efforts to remove water chestnuts. And water chestnuts, first of all, they're an invasive species. So really, they take the resources of other organisms that live in that river ecosystem. So they're not good for the environment of the Mystic River. And also, the cleanup just improved the grade of the river. So if you wanted to kayak down it, you could. As before, water chestnuts, they get caught on the boats and motors, and you just couldn't do that. So this cleanup drastically improved the condition of the Mystic River. And here you can see volunteers helping remove those water chestnuts from the river. And this is an important thing that has happened, not just for the Mystic River, but the Malden River and the Upper Mystic Lake. These are important places for enjoyment and entertainment, to go swimming, to use your boat. So we need to have them cleaned up, but it's also better for the environment to take away invasive species, take away trash that might affect organisms and wildlife that live in these ecosystems.
The 2010s. So starting at 2010, we had our first annual Harvest Your Energy Festival. We had single stream recycling implemented. We received Energy Star plaques for 5 schools, the Brooks, Columbus, Roberts, McGlynn, and Andrews, and also Medford City Hall. Medford won the Leading by Example Award, and we also received Green Communities Energy Efficiency Grant of $270,000.
In 2011, we got new municipal electric and gas contracts. There was a kilowatt program implemented in the Medford Public Library, and the city received a plug-in Prius, as you can see in the photo.
In 2012, Medford implemented the Local Energy Action Plan. There was a solar thermal pre-design study in Medford. We converted to decorative street lighting, and low E-ceilings were implemented at LeConte Rink. And the first annual Green Awards was hosted in Medford in 2012. In 2018, electric car chargers were implemented at City Hall and also at Medford High.
And in 2018, we had solar panels installed on the DPW building. And also in 2019, we had LED streetlights installed as well.
And now we would like to talk about the CCSR and the environment. So the CCSR is the organization we are a part of at the high school. As we mentioned in the beginning, it runs at all of the schools in Medford. So one of the most important projects that comes from the CCSR was the plastic bag ordinance, which was led by Rubia Fernandez, who was a senior at the time. This was last year. And she petitioned to the city council to ban plastic bags from being used in stores, and which she achieved. So that new law took effect in July of 2019. And that's not the only project. We had, as Johnny mentioned, there's electric car chargers at Medford High School. That was a project from the CCSR. There's also a composting initiative to get composting in the cafeterias of Medford High. And there was an initiative to ban styrofoam, which happened quite recently. 2 students went to city council and started the conversation about banning styrofoam from the cafeterias of Medford High. And it's not just Medford High, it's all the schools in Medford. And kids are taking up these projects, and they're of all ages and at every single school in the district. So here are just some Here are just some of them. So like an Earth Day, park cleanup, global climate strike, growing food for the homeless. All of these are immensely important, and these make up a lot of the projects that the CCSR takes on, and it's so important to us and to other students because the point of joining the CCSR is to make a difference in the world, and climate change is such immense crisis. That's the way we want to choose to make a difference, to help fight that. And not all of these projects were completed because of what happened with coronavirus and how the schools were shut down. But we do hope that students will pick up these projects where they left off, or if the students have graduated, they will pass on these projects because these projects are so important to us at the CCSR.
Just continuing off what Tyler said, just through the help of CCSR and just other environmental groups, we just hope that Medford continues to prove its community throughout the years and just continue its legacy of environmental advocacy.
And there was a Medford climate change vulnerability assessment completed in 2019, which will be an overarching guide for city planning and decision making. And often, many people think that, okay, the temperature will raise, weather might get a little funky, but how are we going to be affected? And the answer to that is we will be affected immensely. Here we have two graphics to show where Medford is most vulnerable as climate change progresses. So on the left, we have the heat island effect. So that's basically the areas where heat is rapidly increasing that we must cool down. And as you can see, significant portions of Medford are experiencing a heat island effect. And some of these areas are even hotter than the runway at Logan Airport, which is crazy to think about. And on the right, we have flood probability, which is areas in Medford that will be vulnerable to flooding. And that's a significant portion as well, with the rising sea levels and increasingly erratic weather patterns. Many in Medford can fall victim to flooding. And this is why it is so important that we fight this and we do everything in our power to help make it better. Yeah, thank you.
Medford was one of the first communities in Massachusetts to fully integrate climate resiliency into its open space and recreation plan, which has a supplemental appendix just on climate resiliency.
So this is actually a photo of what is going to be Medford's new library. It's which is scheduled to open in 2021. It actually is going to be the first net zero energy library in Massachusetts.
And moving forward, a committee will be formed to see how to best improve Medford High School, which is not a very sustainable facility. We hope to figure out what the solution is to that, whether that's building a new high school or doing drastic renovations. But there is a committee that's being formed, and students will be involved to help make that decision.
Continuing the legacy, inspired by her teachers in Medford, City Brenner, Medford High School class of 1973, has been an active citizen wherever she has lived. We have her in the Zoom call right now. Her quote is, "Little did I know the path my seventh grade civics teacher, Mr. Tom Convery, was going to lead me down." And yeah, next slide. Continuing the legacy, the mission of the CCSR is to develop responsible global leaders and citizens that will be positive contributors to society and will work to combat important social issues listed above and become leaders in our society. This is our main goal as being in the CCSR is to improve our community and our environment. And we hope to pass that down to future classes.
And we want to say thank you. Thank you to all, to everyone on the Zoom right now. And thank you to everyone that has helped us with our research and the making of this presentation over the past 7 months. And I'd also like to say that this is not the way we had hoped to present this, but we hope it was informative to y'all and that y'all enjoyed it.
Thank you to everyone. I like to.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. So is there any questions that we can answer?
No questions.
Feel free to unmute yourself now. Actually, I'll unmute. Actually, why don't we do this? If you have a question, if you could unmute yourself now, and then ask that would be great.
And if you don't have a mic, just type it in the chat.
Very awkward silence.
If you don't have a question, does anybody have a comment or something to share?
I have a comment.
Of course, go right ahead. Ken, if you want to stop sharing your screen now, I think that could be okay.
Are you ready for a comment?
Of course.
I thought it was a great report.
Thank you.
Extremely well delivered.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
I've been living in Medford since 1982, and I was part of many of the efforts you showed.
Oh, that's great to hear.
Yeah,
That's
great.
amazing.
And I'm glad that you're continuing the work, and I hope your successors do as well as you did.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
This is Cindy. You guys did an awesome job. I have tears in my eyes looking at the history of Medford. I moved there in 1957 and really didn't leave there till 1977. It's just fascinating and very proud of what you all have done in continuing the legacy and activism in my hometown.
Thank you.
Thank you.
You inspired
Do
us.
you want to talk a little bit about that, Cindy? Like, what was the experience like for you?
Watching this now?
When you were, you know, the information we presented, like, can you talk a little bit about like any struggles you had to go through to make some of these things happen, or?
If it weren't for Mr. Convery, I don't think any of us would have been brave enough to do those things because it just wasn't supposed to be our place. I remember my mother couldn't believe it was on the front page of the then Medford Mercury. It was difficult. In one article, I was described as the pert mini-skirted teenager, which, you know, today would never do. But it was, you know, it was kind of us against them kind of mentality. But it grew and became to be the right thing to do.
When you say us against them, what were the biggest struggles that you had? Was it trying to get, you know, legislation, you know, into law? Was it just getting people to listen to you? What were you experiencing?
To be taken seriously. And again, with Mr. Convery's guidance of getting us on the city council agenda of teaching us how to do it the right way, and that and to have the encouragement. And that's what I wanted to give you all, is the encouragement to keep it up. Sometimes it may seem frustrating, but don't give up. And you've done an awesome job, and I'm really proud of you all.
Thank you.
Cindy, sorry to put you on the spot, but do you have any recommendations for the students? Anything we're not thinking of, or anything you'd like to see happen?
You know, just from seeing this now, I don't know in terms of how you share it within the community, if you're getting the publicity, you know, in newspapers and maybe some national recognition for what you're doing in Medford. You know, letting more people know about what you're doing and getting that kind of support behind you.
There's a question from Curtis here.
Oh, yeah.
I think he's saying, what do you think are the best, and thank you, by the way, for the question, Curtis. What do you think are the best ideas for becoming a carbon-free society?
I'd like to just shed a little bit of information. So one of the top like emissions that, well, one of the top contributors to of just like gases going into the atmosphere is transportation. We have so many cars moving along the highway, on the streets every day, and that really builds up. So I think the best way is to, in my personal opinion, would be for electric cars or anything of some sort that just doesn't burn gasoline.
Right.
Yeah, I completely agree with Enzo there. That transportation has the most emissions, and of course it's not feasible for everyone to be able to get an electric car, but they are getting cheaper, and they will keep getting cheaper, which is a great thing. You can also, there's public transportation, which, you know, can help with that. I also, looking on the, personally, I want to take on some of these giant, these industries that pollute so much. That's just kind of the way I look at it. So like the coal industry and the oil industry, I think we can, what I'm trying to do is figure out a way where we can make that not profitable anymore, but that's a very large operation that has to occur. So, I mean, well, so I would go back to what Enzo said, and that's probably
and really just going back to our presentation. If you remember how we talked about the clean bus school, what really separates Medford from the other cities is just like, if you go back, we had the clean school, the clean bus act. I don't know why I said school. The clean bus act, which really, you know, made a huge difference to the environment, considering how it's, you know, it's one of the needs for transportation. So, sorry, John, you can.
Yeah.
I also think that wind turbines are also play a big factor as well, because the wind turbine next to the McGuinn and Andrews Middle School, that plays a huge factor on saving energy. As Enzo said earlier in the presentation, it saves up to 10% of the McGuinn's costs. So,
John, was that the most surprising thing to you of the presentation? Out of everything that you, I guess this is a question for the three of you, what was the most surprising thing you learned?
It's the fact that, like, how much the CCSR has done for our community. I didn't expect how much, like, in a group, for like learners like us and our generation has, how we have contributed to our society and our community, you know. like just banning the plastic bags itself is a really huge thing that contributes to our environment, because we don't see a lot of plastic bags just flying around anymore in Medford. And the push for styrofoam is huge, because styrofoam doesn't erode for like 100 or up to hundreds or thousand or like 1,000 years. So I feel like that would be huge going forward as an environment. But also because that the coronavirus happened, I've been keeping track with the news and stuff like that, and I saw that the biggest hole in our atmosphere above the Antarctica has healed. So that's huge.
Right.
Are any of
And
you thinking about doing a sort of career in environmental activism?
I've always had an idea of doing something in environmental activism. Ever since I was a kid, you can ask my dad. I've always talked about it. Yeah, because I want to keep our future generations safe, and I want to have our future generations to actually live in a safe world. Not in a world that's 100 degrees every day, everywhere. So I want to try to preserve our environment and to um, and um, entertain, to have a smaller carbon footprint for everybody. So that's what I'm pushing for.
I don't really consider. I'm not really considering any careers in, just environmental advocacy or anything like that. But I do keep it in the back of my mind, just for the sake of everyone else. So just for if there's anything I can do to help out the environment, I always keep that in mind.
I've been thinking about journalism and also therapy, which either one, there can be connections to the environment. Journalism, you can be an environmental writer and whatnot. And therapy, I'm interested more in abstract therapies, and one of the big ones is nature therapy, which for me personally has really helped me with my mental health. So if I were going to go into a therapy position, it would be something like that, where I could be like a nature therapist, because physically a good environment is not just good for you physically, it's good for you mentally. I can go to the Fells, and that's where I'm happy, and I know that that's how a lot of other people see it. So yeah.
I did want to add that there isn't necessarily a corporate disconnect between environmental activism, and I spent the last 16 years of my career doing marketing and business development for a huge natural gas company. But I did a lot of studies on energy analysis, cost efficiencies, helping developers and builders choose the right mix. And Medford is very different from Lexington, Kentucky, from Dallas, Texas. So, the coal industry is very big, was big in Kentucky. So there's a balance. There's a balance that you keep in there also.
Thank you, Cindy. I appreciate
Thank you.
I think that we're so grateful for everyone for coming. Cindy, thank you for coming. You were in the presentation, and I wanted to really say thank you to the 3 students who did such an amazing job. They are amazing. I want to give them a round of applause.
Yay!
Thank you.
I would also like to give a big shout out to Ken Krause, who has done, he came, yes, yes, a round of applause. He actually, but when we were not when we were in school still, when it wasn't COVID-19, Ken would actually come to our class at 8 o'clock in the morning to meet with the 3 students. I have these 3 students in my diversity class, and he would show up at 8 o'clock in the morning to meet with them pretty much every month. And he sort of came up with the idea of sort of spearheading this project, and the students really wanted to do it, and they have been wonderful, and Ken has been wonderful. So I just want to say, Ken, I don't know if you wanted to say something, Ken, but from the bottom of our hearts from the CCSR, we wanted to say thank you to you.
Oh, thanks for that. No, it was a delight to work with the students, and I was blown away by the commitment of the CCR program in general, but also the focus on the environmental aspect. I would suspect that this is the one segment of the CCR program that has the most projects in it. I'm just curious why that is and how the students particularly became motivated. Is it because of teachers in the system? Is it because of what they experience in their day-to-day lives? Or I'm just curious how the environment has sort of risen to the top in terms of the focus area more broadly through CCSR, if anybody has any thoughts on that.
Well, I think that in Medford we have a large focus on science, which plays a big role as, we list in our classes, we are taught about the environment, we're taught about the effects it will have, and that pushes us to action when we hear some of these things. So I would say part of it is due to the focus on science we have in Medford.
I just want to add that just basically you just see in almost everywhere on maybe social media, the news, sometimes you could hear even the president talking about it, just about how our environment is changing. So I think with this, all this and like information being told to us, I think it kind of pushed us as CCSR to be a little more focused on that and to get to be the first step in the change for a better environment.
Does Medford still offer civics classes? That was
No, I don't think so.
Well, it's kind of intertwined with lots of our history classes.
okay.
I wasn't speaking, but I was with a group of other students who went to City Hall to talk about how we were being paid because we work at the after school program, and one of the teachers got up, and after we had a few student representatives talk to the city council, this teacher got up and she defended us, which was really a really potent experience. Because I think that shows that they do care that we are active in the society that we live in.
Awesome.
And I think that doesn't just go for that specific teacher, but most of the teachers, not just history teachers, do care that you become an active participant in our government.
Tyler, that's beautiful, and I actually will add that I think all of the students are amazing and really doing great work, like the 3 of you, and I'm so proud of all the work you've done. Sincerely, thank you so much for everything. They've been working on this project since, I think, September, right, Tyler? Is that right?
Yeah.
Yeah,
September. So we were initially going to be presenting this to City Hall, but after COVID-19, we decided to go the virtual route. But this presentation will be made available on our social media pages. So if you look up CCSR, which stands for Center for Citizenship and Social Responsibility, we will post this video for anybody who wants to see it again or forward it out. I'll do that probably tonight or tomorrow. Well, thank you so much, everyone.
Thank you.
Does anybody have any more comments or questions? If not, I'm going to end the recording. All right, awesome. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Congratulations to the 3 students. Thank you so much, Ken, for all of your help, and we'll see you real soon.
Thank you, everybody.
Right? Bye-bye.